Hello and welcome to another episode of Acting Prime Minister with me, Paul Brand, the podcast where we pick the PM and ask a different guest each week to imagine themselves behind that Downing Street door. A couple of weeks ago, we had a former Father of the House on this podcast. This week's guest is unofficially the baby of the current Commons. At just 23, she's the youngest MP elected in December, representing Nottingham East for Labour. She had been searching for a temporary Christmas job when she unexpectedly landed this one, a slightly less temporary contract of around 5 years. Nadia Whittome, welcome to Acting Prime Minister. And how do you feel about that title, Baby of the House?
Oh, it's a little bit patronising, isn't it? But I don't really mind it. I suppose it gives me a platform to talk about things that people might not otherwise listen to. So I've used it to raise the climate crisis, to raise the immense amounts of poverty in my constituency.
Because I was going to ask you, do you feel, being a completely different age to most MPs, you're less than sort of half the age of the average MP, do you feel as though you're bringing issues to the House that other MPs, even on your own side, aren't necessarily raising because maybe it's just not something that affects their generation?
I do feel responsible not just for representing my constituents, but I said in my maiden speech as well, for representing my generation, particularly with regards to the climate emergency, because it's my generation that has put this at the top of the global agenda. So I've been working with youth climate strikers, both before I was elected and since coming to this place.
And do you feel, when you interact with other MPs, have you had a bit of sort of patronising language, and do people sort of say, oh, she's a bit young to be an MP and all that sort of stuff?
Little bit. Someone called me chicken the other day.
What does that even mean?
My mum hasn't even called me chicken since I was about 6.
What did you say in response? You just took it?
It happened quite quickly, actually. I didn't. I was sort of like, what? But yeah, there is. But I think actually we're all quite united to face the job that we've got on our hands, which is 5 years of a Tory majority, a big Tory majority. We know that we're not going to win any votes. So we're all kind of coming together to get stuck into the work that has to be done.
Well, look, you've already risen pretty quickly, but let's promote you all the way into number 10 now, as we like to do on this podcast. And you would be just the youngest Prime Minister we've ever had in the history of the United Kingdom. William Pitt the Younger was 24. I read this from Wikipedia, back in the early 18th century. So
that was probably quite old then, wasn't it?
Yeah, actually, probably life expectancy then was about 35. Yeah. So let's get you settled into the Downing Street study to begin with. What is the picture that you think you'd hang on the wall?
So the picture that I've got at the moment on my laptop is one from the launch of my campaign. Mm-hmm. So I was elected to be Labour's candidate for Nottingham East just a day before the election was called. So the next morning, it was a few days later actually, we all, about 150 local activists, all gathered on the steps in St Anne's outside Robin Hood Chase, and we had this amazing photo of all of us. So that's the thing that keeps me going.
That'd be your kind of inspiration in Downing Street. What's the first drink that you'd pour yourself as you're settling in? Have you got a particular?
Oh, any drink at all. Rum and ginger beer, spice rum, obviously, and the cans of ginger beer, because when you get the big bottle, it doesn't fizz.
Yeah, it goes flat, doesn't it, really quickly. Who's the first person you'd call?
Oh, I think it would have to be my mum, wouldn't it? Although I don't know how interested she'd be. I called her when I was selected to be the Labour candidate, and it had been a whole day of the hustings and the votes were being counted, and she picked up the phone and she said, oh, well done. I'm just walking the dog, actually, but well done.
Is she political, or is she kind of interested in politics? Or
She is, yeah, she is. So she was a member of the Labour Party, and then she left over Clause 4. And then she rejoined in 2015 when we lost the election.
Okay.
After a couple of years of me badgering her to join.
Maybe she just always knew that you were on a path to great things, and she's like, yeah, okay, fine, you're an MP. That's what I expected.
I think what she says is that she's proud, but she's no more proud of me now than when I was a care worker or a hate crime worker. She's no more proud of me than she is of my brother. We're just mums, isn't it?
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk a bit now about your path to power, because you grew up in Nottinghamshire and both your mum and your dad have Indian heritage. Your mum brought you up on her own, working as a solicitor. How would you describe your childhood?
It was a mixed bag. I grew up under a Labour government, so that afforded me a lot of opportunities that children don't have now. But certainly growing up, so I was 13 when the coalition government was elected.
Okay.
My school became an academy very quickly. And I saw my peers in mental health crises, some of them attempting to take their own lives, not having a safety net to fall back on. Growing up, I saw the bedroom tax absolutely wrecking my community, people living from food banks, working 2 or 3 jobs, unable to eat sometimes so that their kids could.
And that's what brought you into politics ultimately, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You were very clear that your mission really was to join a party that was an anti-austerity party. You wanted Labour to be that party, and you fully supported Jeremy Corbyn's leadership.
Yeah, I did.
And
I did. In fact, Jeremy Corbyn launched his campaign, his leadership campaign in Nottingham in 2015. It was a tiny launch, about less than 100 people. And I was there then. And then he came back a few weeks later and there were 1,500 people overflowing in this big concert hall. And I was really privileged to address his rally then too.
And you didn't dive straight into politics, did you? Because you studied law for a while at university and then you left because of financial reasons, I believe. And what happened
that's right. University's so expensive, isn't it? It just wasn't viable for me to be able to stay there. And because while I was there, it meant that I couldn't be working full time.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to stop university, to leave that door open to myself at a later date and to start earning so that I could contribute to the household.
And you did work as a care worker, as you've already mentioned, and also for a hate crime project. And then you got selected to be an MP, literally the day before Boris Johnson called the election.
Yeah. The hustings was the day before and I had to regain my voice in less than a day.
So you're thrown straight into a campaign. I mean, that must have been, a pretty heavy thing to get going on in your your career in politics has just begun really, and you're thrown straight into an election campaign.
Oh, it was a total whirlwind.
Yeah, because you had been looking for a temporary job at Christmas, I think, hadn't you?
Yeah, so I was looking for Christmas temp. I applied for loads of stuff. Paul Smith, call centre, Poundland, loads of things. I didn't get anything actually, but I do now, so all's well that ends well.
Although, as I said earlier, it's sort of a temporary job in itself, but I mean, your seat is very safe, but are you kind of aware that maybe this is a career that might come to an end at some point, that you might not get a full 40 years out of it?
This should never be a job for life. And ultimately, I'm a Labour MP, so I'm selected by my local party, and I've said that I'll undergo open selection every 5 years. So if my local party thinks that I've done a good job and they want me to stand to be their Labour candidate again, then they'll have that choice.
And I think it's fair to say that you're firmly on the left with your politics. Is that how you describe yourself as well? Do you very much see yourself in that vein of politics that Jeremy Corbyn started in 2015?
I'm a democratic socialist and I believe in an open, pluralist politics as well. So I think that there's nothing wrong with disagreeing. We're a broad church and I like the Labour Party to be a broad church. I think it should include people to my left, people quite a long way to my right even. But the key is disagreeing well. And that's what we need to do better at in the party, is to disagree well.
Because that is a more inclusive approach than some have taken in the party. I mean, some feel very aggrieved that people to the right of where you are in politics criticise Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, Richard Bergen, for example, said on the weekend that he doesn't think MPs like that should be around anymore. He blames them partly for why Labour lost the election, but you seem to be a bit more tolerant. You think that it's a healthy debate maybe to have that in the Labour Party?
I think it depends how the debate is done. And that's why I stress the point about needing to disagree well. I think it's good to have a diversity of opinion within the party, and the Labour Party should be able to hold all of those different opinions.
And
of course, I'll be fighting for my political perspective to be the dominant one in the Labour Party.
Because it's interesting, because you backed Clive Lewis to begin with in the race, and then obviously he dropped out, so then you backed Emily Thornberry. And
well, I nominated Emily Thornberry, but I didn't back her.
Okay, so
I
because now
thought
you're
that
backing Rebecca Long-Bailey.
I thought that it was important that. So I've said for a long time that MPs should not be gatekeepers to democracy, and I had no intention of acting as one. So I think that every candidate who put themselves forward should have been on the ballot, and that members should have had a choice as to who they backed, even if their choice wasn't my choice. So I wasn't going to stand in the way of people voting for Emily Thornberry. So I nominated her when Clive Lewis dropped out.
Because a lot of your colleagues who are part of the new intake, who are firmly of the left, who've come through the party under Jeremy Corbyn, did dive straight in and they backed Rebecca Long-Bailey right from the start. Did you not feel sort of pressure to do the same thing, to prove your socialist credentials and back her straight away?
I don't need to prove my socialist credentials. I live them. I wanted to wait to see what people's proposals were. So I said from the beginning that my priorities are somebody who can lead the conversation on immigration, not just follow it, someone who prioritises the climate crisis and has the kind of radical proposals required to tackle it, and someone who's going to be committed to a left-wing economic agenda, but also one that puts power in people's hands very locally. So I've been waiting to see who comes out strongest on those things, and it's become clear during the course of the campaign that that person is Rebecca.
Because she has got the Green New Deal and other policies, and you feel as if that's the right fit for you. Do you think that it's sort of inevitable that Keir Starmer's going to win now? He just seems so far ahead, doesn't he?
I don't think we can. I mean, if the last 5 years in politics has taught us anything, we can't be certain of any wins or losses, can we?
It's just looking at the kind of CLP nominations and everything, though. I mean, from a logical point of view, you would assume that he is going to win the contest. Are you going to be happy to be an MP under Keir Starmer?
I'd be very happy to be an MP under Keir Starmer. Whoever wins the leadership and deputy leadership will have my full support.
Do you trust him not to take the party back to the centre? Because some of your colleagues feel sort of a bit suspicious of it.
I think trust is the wrong word in politics. Politics should not be about faith and trust. It's about organising and making sure that your priorities are heard by people who have power. So I'll be loyal from the backbenches to whoever is the leader, but at the same time making sure that they're steadfast on those issues that I've outlined as being really important to me and to my constituents.
I just ask you this because there is a bit of a fear among some MPs on the left that I pick up that if Keir Starmer wins, then he will move the party towards the centre, and that actually the left could then become the sort of marginalised force within the party. Again, maybe some of those MPs we've seen on the front bench could move to the back bench, and that the centre will sort of regain control, and all the work that people have been doing on your wing of the party will be lost. And you don't share that fear?
It's up to us what we do after the leadership election, whoever wins. And what I want to see is us building this coalition of the radical left in Parliament and outside of Parliament to bring to the forefront those really important issues, like reviving our democracy. We've got a system now that just doesn't work. I think it's not an exaggeration to say that democracy is broken. In this first past the post system, people are essentially denied representation. So that's one of the many things that I want to see us organising around.
So let's go back to you being Prime Minister now, or maybe Leader of the Opposition. Who would you have in...
Hey, don't be so negative.
Yeah, I mean, it could be both. You could be Prime Minister and the Labour leader. Who would you have in the cabinet or shadow cabinet?
Who would I have? I'm a big supporter of John McDonnell's, particularly his work around alternative ownership and public ownership. I think is fantastic.
Renationalising the railways, etc., as per the Labour manifesto.
Yeah. I think Annalise Dodds is a very interesting politician.
Okay, Shadow Brexit, part of the Shadow Brexit team, isn't she?
Yeah. What Clive Lewis said during the leadership election on reviving our democracy within the party and outside of the party, resisting lurches to social conservatism and his work on sustainable economics, I think, has to be part of any future Treasury team. Who else is... There's a massive wealth of talent in the Parliamentary Labour Party.
I mean, you can have anyone from history as well, if you like. Are there Labour figures from the past that you, in a fantasy world, would love to bring back?
Mrs Desai, who led the Grunwick strikes.
Okay, yeah.
She would be in my cabinet, my dinner party, everything.
Any other figures who sort of led Labour from the past that you really admire?
I think Mrs Desai is a really interesting one because she's someone who wasn't a polished politician in the way that we see politicians now. Her style of leadership was completely different, and I think that's really important going forwards, that we reimagine what leadership looks like, that it's not hierarchical, it's not a white middle-class man in a suit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she also challenged stereotypes about Asian women as not being docile and submissive.
Okay, so that's who you'd have in the cabinet / shadow cabinet. And what would be the first policy that you'd pass, do you think, if you were Prime Minister?
The first thing that I'd do is start a bill for a Green New Deal, one that would secure the kind of investment that we need in green infrastructure, in industry. So I'm currently working with Teach the Future, which is a group of climate strikers, around an education bill for climate that would put climate on the national curriculum. And that would be just part of a Green New Deal under the next Labour government, I hope. But also a living wage. One of the huge, the great things that the last Labour government did was introducing the minimum wage. And it still baffles me that that came in the 90s. As late as the 90s, I was 1 year old when the minimum wage was introduced.
Yeah.
And we need to build on that to have a proper living wage.
Okay, and there would be some pressing issues on your desk as well as Prime Minister, so I'll just ask you about a couple of them. Brexit for a start. I mean, would you want to rejoin the EU? Because you are a pro-European MP. Would you want to rejoin?
I think the question now is not about rejoin, it's about the kind of Brexit deal that we want to secure. So one that prioritises the environment and has no regression from EU standards. Trading standards. I don't want my constituents eating chicken that has to be chlorinated to make it fit for human consumption. Workers' rights and social rights. These are the big pressing issues that I'll be scrutinising the government on in the coming months and years.
And what about extending freedom of movement? Because you've spoken already in this podcast about the way we treat immigrants in this country. Do you think it's right that people should still be free to come to this country?
Absolutely. I think that visa-free immigration is a worker's right, because a points-based system isn't about stopping people from coming here or stopping people from moving away from here. People will always move country. A visa-based immigration system ensures that when people do move, we're not precarious. We can join a union, we can stand up to bosses, and that in turn boosts everyone's workers' rights. So this points-based system is actually something that should be concerning everyone, even if you've got a British passport.
So how would it work in practice then for you? That you'd just be free to move here from anywhere in the world? Or
it would have to be incremental, and it would have to be done first with countries that have similar economies to ours, so that there's no loss on either side. So as it works within the EU, but gradually expanded outwards.
Okay, and how quickly do you think that would happen? Is it something that you would like to see happen rapidly, for us to open our borders to the rest of the world, within a matter of years rather than decades?
I think we'd have to see. That would depend on economies around the world. So if other economies around the world quickly grew, then it could happen more quickly. If they didn't, then it would happen more slowly.
Because how do you feel about the debate regarding immigration at the moment? Obviously, there has been a bit of a criticism of the Labour Party that in those seats that you lost during the election, the party was out of touch with those who voted Brexit. A lot of people who voted Brexit had concerns about immigration. Is this a kind of Is this a fruitful path for the Labour Party to say we want to be even more liberal on immigration? Do you not worry that there could be quite a backlash in former Labour heartlands about that?
The job of the Labour Party and the Labour movement is to lead the conversation, not give in to the most socially conservative elements of our society. This is the right thing. Migrants' rights are human rights, they're workers' rights, and that's what the Labour Party exists to do. So it might be a difficult job, of course it will be a difficult job, but our job is to make the argument that we have more in common with a Polish fruit picker, a Romanian lawyer, an Indian doctor, a Filipino nurse, than we do with Boris Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg, or any of the elites in this country, or any other country.
I suppose the challenge, though, is that lots of voters in the election felt they had more in common with Boris Johnson than they did with Jeremy Corbyn or whoever your new leader might be. And then the challenge for Labour is I get what you're saying about leading people, but if they've already got a kind of formed view on immigration, it's going to be a real challenge.
Some people do, but let's not forget that huge numbers of working class people voted Labour in the last election. And we're not a party about doing things for people. We're a party made up of working class people, and we'll be leading the conversation on that. Well, certainly that's what I'll be doing as a Labour MP.
OK, what about Heathrow's third runway? Because that's been in the news the past couple of weeks. Obviously, there's a big legal battle over it. As someone who cares a lot about climate change, do you think it should be scrapped?
Absolutely. It's not compatible with our climate obligations. We're not going to reach net zero by 2050 at the current rate. At our current rate, we'll reach net zero by 2099. Who knows whether we'll have a planet to live on by 2099 anyway. So absolutely, Heathrow, the third runway being scrapped, was always the obvious choice if we're to practice what we preach on climate neutral, carbon neutral.
And one other thing that people have asked you a lot about is obviously your wage, because you decided to only take £35,000 of your wage as an MP. You could get up to almost sort of £80,000 as an MP. And you did that because you want to give the rest to charity. And you tell me why you did that. I'm putting words into your mouth, but...
So I've said that I'll take home 35k and I'll give the rest to local causes and strike funds. And that's because I think that it's an important representational principle for workers' representatives, because that's what I am. I'm here to represent the interests of working class people, to be on a worker's wage. It's not a criticism of other MPs, and it's not saying that MPs don't work very hard. We do, but so do care workers, as I was before I was an MP. So do firefighters, teaching assistants, nurses, and I'll take my pay rise when they take theirs.
So how will that work practically for you if you move up through the career scales within Labour? Say you got appointed to the shadow cabinet, say you became Prime Minister. Is that a principle you'd want to continue, that you'd only ever take an average wage?
This is my pledge to my constituents for the next 5 years. For now, I'm very happy being a backbencher. I'm really enjoying being a backbencher and scrutinising the government and holding them to account, as I have on the charter flight, where we managed to get 50 minus 17.
33?
Yeah.
It's like a test of me now, this podcast.
33 people off that charter flight, as I have leading a Westminster Hall debate on climate justice. This is what I want to be doing for the foreseeable future, serving my constituents and speaking out on the issues that I'm really passionate about.
OK, well, let's just do some quick fire questions to finish off this podcast now. Right. Which world leader would you want to call first, do you think?
Bernie Sanders.
Yeah?
In anticipation of him being a world leader soon.
So obviously we know who you're supporting in the presidential race. What would your Downing Street pet be?
Oh, my dog.
Yeah, you've already got a dog?
Yeah.
What kind of dog is it?
She's a black lab.
Oh, nice. OK. I don't think we've ever
miss
had
her a lot.
Yeah, we haven't had a sort of big dog in Downing Street for decades, because there's Dylan the dog, but he's a little Jack Russell. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see a Labrador roaming the corridors.
Yeah, Downing Street is much bigger than my 2 Up, 2 Down, so I could expand my pet empire.
Yeah, you could have a whole family of Labradors, maybe.
Yeah. She'd love that.
What song would you dance to at party conference?
Oh, you wouldn't catch me dancing on stage at party conference, so...
I
always think that we should, at party conference, that we should have Beyonce to the left playing, and my go-to song choice for Alex Sobel's DJ set would be Too Many Man, Skepta.
Alex Sobel, the MP, of course. Okay, all right, all excellent answers that I cannot argue with. And lastly, would you ever want to be Prime Minister, do you think?
It's a funny old question, isn't it? I've just been elected. It wasn't in my plan to become an MP, let alone Prime Minister. Right now, my focus is, and always will be, on serving my constituents, on setting up my office. We only got the keys to this place a few weeks ago. But also, I'd never say never, and I don't think that ambition in women politicians is a bad thing. I always think that there are two types of people in this place. There are people who want to be something and people who want to do something, and I consider myself in the latter category. So if I felt that I really had something to contribute in the cabinet, then I would be open to joining.
And I love that
But
you
right
say,
now I'm very happy on the backbenches.
I love that you talk about doing things just literally behind your head. There's a big to-do list on the board, which is blank for now, which either means you're really efficient and you've done it all, or you've left loads of space to write down loads of great ideas that you're going to focus on as MP. But
I'll let you decide.
all right, Nadia Whittome, thanks so much for coming on Acting Prime Minister.
Thanks a lot, Paul.